It's been a while since I've written anything related to the Disney Corporation, and I'm sure you can understand why. A lot's been going on since my last post. I've received a lot of questions and concerns from folks who read my first-hand account of Mowgli's Palace, a resort that was built and abandoned by Disney. I want to thank everyone who mirrored my post. It's been taken down from a few places, mostly corporate sites that were easily leaned upon by a larger power. However, for every new topic and disappearing blog post, it seems like 100 more popped up. This is something they'll have to face. There's no going back for them. None for me either. I'm definitely being followed. For the first month or two, I chalked it up to paranoia. Any casual glance or half smile in my direction set me off, hair standing up on the back of my neck and everything. The first one, or rather the first one I was actually able to spot, was a telephone worker milling around my apartment complex. He was a middle-aged guy, dressed as you would expect, but something just seemed off about him. I couldn't place it, but I knew this wasn't just my imagination acting up. He was awkward and out of place, not someone who was comfortable doing his routine job. I followed him around a corner, only to lose him there. When I turned back around to go home, there he was, staring directly at me about 10 feet behind me, expressionless and cold. "Exploring?" he asked. That's all he said, but there was an accusing tone to his voice. Tell me, what kind of blue-collar phone jockey does that? I guess that's the worst part, never feeling safe and never feeling alone. That and the occasional Disney merchandise left somewhere for me to find. Yeah, you heard right. Little rubber Mickeys in the mailbox, a Disney Adventures magazine on my bookshelf. They hide little Mickeys everywhere, 3 circles, one big, 2 small, in the silhouette of a famous mouse head. I started keeping a running list of Mickeys I found. Coffee cup rings on my coffee table, 1 big, 2 small. Coloured glass bottles on my doorstep, view from the top down, all red. Graffiti on the wall on my way to work. A huge earth, small sun and moon in the proper locations. They're everywhere. People have emailed me about this as well. If you repost anything I have to say, you're going to start finding those son of a bitch outlines, I guarantee it. The best one by far, one that actually made me laugh because of the horror of it all, was a drawing in chalk next to my car. I was taken aback at first walking through the parking garage, keeping an eye out for anyone following me. The outline seemed a perfect match for, well, a murder victim. You're probably familiar if you read my previous posts. Written in yellow, paint, I'm sure, was a single word. Retract. The only good thing that's come out of all of this is that I know I'm not the only one who's seen something they shouldn't have. I'm not going to give their names because, what if I have to tell you you haven't been paying attention? Researcher goes to the Disney parks whenever he can, all throughout the year. He's not going to have fun, enjoy the rides, etc. He's looking for the gascots. There's been a long tradition apparently of people reporting strange patrons throughout the park. Silent, motionless, staring patrons of every age, shape and size, men, women and children and teens, all wearing Disney-themed gas masks. Way back then, Disney would get a ton of complaints about oddly dressed folks following others around the park, folks who would then merge into crowds and disappear. Later on, the gas masks caused folks to draw other conclusions and reports of possible terrorists and bombers started flowing. All of these reports most likely went straight down the drain. I know I can't find any such occasions reported in the media, although you should be aware that Disney can control its press like no other. Researcher goes to the parks, talks to a few people and tries not to draw any attention to himself. He'll just ask 3 or 4 families if they've seen his friend who's wearing a funny mask. He's yet to see a gascot for himself, though on one occasion a child pointed him towards Frontier Town. As he raced through the crowd, he heard a single voice cry out overhead, "Mommy, I want a goofy air mask too!" A fellow I'll call lifeguard worked in a Disney water park from 2001 to 2003. He stood at the top of a huge water slide and made sure that none of the kids got too rowdy. He passed the kids through one at a time, over and over again, telling them to be safe and keep their arms and legs in and so on. One day, as he tells it, a fat kid goes down the tube and doesn't come out the other end. He sent 2 or 3 kids in after. The whole thing moves at a steady clip, so naturally you would expect that the fat kid got stuck and the kids that followed him would be stuck too. Not so. Only the fat kid disappears. Everyone else comes out the other ends, cheering and splashing like nothing's wrong. Lifeguard shuts down the slide, much to the aggravation of the kids waiting. Before he can go through any of the Disney strict procedures, splash! Fatty finally comes out. Staff members pulled the kid out of the water. He sank like a stone when he hit, his skin already blue and his eyes wide. All he would say is, "No face, kids, and stop squeezing." The kid was okay, in case you're wondering. He got carted right off to the medical centre when Lifeguard was told to open the slide back up. He made a big stink about how it clearly wasn't safe. Despite his complaints, he was threatened with firing and begrudgingly opened the slide again. From that point on, he kept a closer eye on the kids. Every so often they'd come out in the wrong order. Never as stunned as the fat kid, but always had a vague look of concern, as if they were trying to figure out what was reality. They'd take on some water and choke a bit, but they would always come back and ride again. I read his emails with the same kind of concern you may be feeling right now. I wanted him to share his own story, but in the end he didn't want to expose himself that way. I can't say I blame him. Snow White, which wasn't actually the role she played, she was a character in the park, she had a nice tidbit for me. You know what happens when a costumed employee drops dead in his suit? Like, 1 second he's taking a picture of little Jimmy and the next, he had a failed heart stroke. A second costumed mascot in the area has to sit with the corpse on a curb or bench and wait for a designated dry cleaner to arrive and cart the body away in a discreet manner. All the while, patrons have no idea they're sitting with a dead body. Feel free to check your photo albums at this point. That was bad, but another fellow, Janitor, went completely off the creepy charts. Disney World, and probably the others, is built with a series of underground tunnels just below your feet. 3 stories worth. Anything and everything you can imagine is down there for use of the employees. They're called utilidors, utility corridors. Basically, that's the reason you don't see characters out of place or janitors wandering around the park. They pop in and out of hidden doors and travel to a concealed town which you're walking on. Janitor told me something that might be common knowledge but was nevertheless news to me. Walt Disney had several apartments built into his parks. There's one above Cinderella's castle, there's one in the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, they're all over the place. More than that, there are nightclubs, a bowling alley and much more, all built into doors which you pass by without a second look. Club 22 is one such hidden area. If you have the cash to join the exclusive club, you don't, then you'll have access to it and much more. Club 22 is a place where anything goes. Disney Co calls these places dark zones. Spots where Mickey Mouse gives way to drinking, drugs and yes, sex. Conversely, the rest of the park is the bright zone with a few grey zones and utilidors in between. As far as Janitor said, it wasn't always that way. It was more of a slow decline and the gradual relaxation of social norms within that elite group. The reason why he knows all this? You may have already guessed. He cleaned it. After a lengthy background check and a non-disclosure form, Janitor moved up from a park attendant to one of the dark zone cleaning crew. Now before you get some satanic human sacrifice vision in your head, Janitor saw nothing of the sort. Lots of empty alcohol bottles? Yes. Used condoms scattered around like deflated New Year's balloons? Oh yeah. He cleared up his share of blood, piss and vomit, but it was all down to the unrestricted behaviour of patrons, as opposed to any sort of cult behaviour. Well, at least that's how he saw it in retrospect. All that trash, that profane shit, went into a furnace and mingled with the smoke of quaint cottages' chimney. So if you've been to Disney World, you've breathed ultra-condensed sin. Backing up this information was Hammer. Hammer mailed me the old-fashioned way, though I don't know how he got my home address. He sent me photocopies of work papers proving his employment with the instruction to burn them when I was convinced, which I did gladly. Hammer worked around the Disney World park, doing demolition and construction. At one point he was approached by a superior regarding some strange construction plans. There was a wide rectangular area marked off on the blueprints, about the size of a supermarket. The area was left unnamed and only bore the words, "Do not dig." Not only was his superior in the dark, but he was super fucking purposeful in the dark. He didn't want to talk about it, he didn't want to know about it, and ended the conversation with, "This space intentionally left blank." Hammer didn't get it. The area seemed a waste of space and it was directly conflicting with the work him and his team had been given. He started poking around the area in his off time, finding only a steel door with a great span of concrete just beyond. It was a supermarket's worth of blank grey floor. Soon after, Hammer started picking gascots out of the crowd. Unlike the other reports, the things would stand in full view of the guy. They'd clustered together in the distance, or they'd be pressed against the wall when he turned a corner. He said they moved weird, like they were weak or injured, like a deer that had been run down by a hunter and couldn't flee anymore. The gas masks, the Disney character faces with the filters jammed in. He noted that some seemed wet on the inside, like condensation on a car window. Tiny beads of water glimmered from behind the glass, making it impossible for any of them to actually see. Poking further, Hammer started asking questions of anyone and everyone who had been working in the park for a decade or more. He hit dead ends throughout until he was directed to Ida, an elderly woman who worked in a restaurant on Main Street. She'd been there since way back, and though nobody had the balls to ask directly, everyone knew she had some pretty terrible stories to tell. Hammer asked about the empty space, then about the gas mask customers. And at first he thought he would receive the same non-answered he had gotten so far. She was quiet. Eerily quiet. "Room 0, she croaked, a single shaken hand placed on her cheek, as if she was a little girl fearing her father's punishment. She didn't meet the man's eyes for the entire conversation. Room 0, as it turned out, was yet another hidden room, just like the apartments in Club 22. However, its sheer size and spot deep beneath the park set it apart from any of the fun dark zones. It was a bomb shelter. Room 0 was to be stocked with enough rations to feed the entire park's average number of patrons at any given moment, and housed a smaller and yet lavish panic room for Disney higher-ups. During World War II, official Disney gas masks were actually produced for children to wear in the event of an attack. The idea was that it would be less scary for kids if Mickey Mouse's face was emblazoned on the wartime safety device. Yes, I know the obvious problems with that. During the Cold War scare of the 60s, when Disney World was constructed, Room 0 was stocked with similar masks as well. Whether they cared about the fears of the children or just callous branding, things found their way down there. What's more, some genius decided that the kids would then be frightened of the gas masks their parents wore. And so, all masks, adult and child, were made to comply with this insane standard. Ida described it as treating a wound with lemon juice. None of this explained what Hammer had been seeing. Not only the seemingly supernatural appearances, but also the emptied out room as well. "I've been there," he explained. "There's nothing but a cement floor and 4 walls. "No," Ida shook her head and covered her mouth, stifling a sob. "You've been on top of it. Someone or something sounded the alarm one day when the park was at full capacity. The warning was clear, it was supposedly an air attack. Security ushered everyone down into the tremendous shelter. There, they were ordered to put on their masks and hunker down for the duration of the assault. Everything was quiet for 30 minutes, save for the crying children and frightened whispers. No one wanted to die, so in a way they were thankful for the strange measure and safety. Then, the first scream rang out. "Hey! Quit pinching!" a man shouted. "Who's running around? Settle down! Who's laughing? This isn't funny! Ah, who stepped on my foot?" Despite security guards urging to calm everyone down and keep their cool, the crowd became more and more agitated until finally, after nearly an hour of madness, the lights flickered, then died. Staff members and a select few patrons made it out of the door, ready to face the war above rather than be in the insanity below. And what they found, of course, was a desolate yet untouched theme park. The music continued to play, echoing through the silent storybook towns. Upon returning to Room 0, the few who stood at the top of the steel staircase that led down into the pitch blackness heard no sign of the previous fray. There was only silence. Ida herself descended that staircase, despite the begging of those she left above. She reached the refined doors, herself now awash in darkness and hearing only buzzing in her ears. A single voice came out of the darkness. The echo made it impossible to tell whether the mocking, raspy voice was at the back of the bomb shelter or if it was right in front of her face. "Shut the door, dear. You're letting out the cold." Gripped by terror, she did just that. Within days, the entire thing, shelter, staircase, all of it, was covered with feet upon feet of cement. Air systems and generators above its ceiling were removed, creating the large empty space. "They're all still down there," Ida told Hammer. "Down there with whoever that was." You might have noticed that I've used Ida's real name. Unfortunately, she passed away soon after telling her story. Accidental fall, supposedly, after getting out of bed to turn on a light. Such a company devotee, the paper reported, that her entire room was covered with Mickey Mouse silhouettes.